In the landscape of modern business, we are often surrounded by companies that are good. They have solid products, decent reputations, and consistent quarterly earnings. However, the tragedy of being good is that it often prevents a company from ever becoming great. We settle for the status quo because it is comfortable and safe. But what if there was a definitive, data-driven roadmap that could take an organization from the plateau of mediocrity to the peak of world-class performance? This is the central question that drove Jim Collins and his dedicated research team on a 5-year journey of discovery. Following the massive success of his previous work, Built to Last, which focused on how enduringly great companies maintain their status, Collins realized that a massive gap in knowledge existed. Most companies don't start out as great, they start out as average. The real mystery isn't how the great stay great, but how the average can transform their DNA to achieve a level of success that far outpaces the general market. In the pages that follow, we will pull back the curtain on a massive study involving thousands of articles and interviews. You will learn about the specific, often counterintuitive transformations that occurred within a handful of elite companies. We will explore why some organizations manage to leapfrog their competitors while others, with the same resources and opportunities, fell by the wayside or suffered through short-lived bursts of success before crashing back to earth. This journey is not about finding a magic pill or a trendy management fad. Instead, it is about identifying the timeless principles of disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the mechanics of greatness and how these insights can be applied to any organization, regardless of its size or industry. We are about to look at the evidence-based reality of what it truly takes to make the leap. To understand the transition from good to great, we must first understand the rigorous framework of the study that identified these principles. Jim Collins and his team didn't just pick companies they liked. They used a strict set of financial criteria to identify good to great companies, those that performed at or below the market for 15 years, then shifted to a trajectory where they beat the market by at least 3 times for the following 15 years. This book is organized around the key findings of that research. We begin by looking at the type of leadership required to steer such a massive change, moving away from the myth of the celebrity CEO and toward a more humble, yet fiercely determined, model of management. From there, we move into the first who principle, which argues that the people you have on your team are more important than the direction you are heading. The core of the book explores the hedgehog concept, a strategic framework that forces a company to find the intersection of its greatest strengths, its deepest passions, and its economic engine. We will also examine the flywheel effect, which explains how greatness is the result of cumulative momentum rather than a single eureka moment. Finally, we will look at how a culture of discipline and a healthy relationship with technology can accelerate a company toward its goals. This orientation serves as your map for the deep dive into the specific behaviors and mindsets that separate the world-class from the merely functional. In the world of strategy, there is a fundamental divide between 2 types of thinkers, famously illustrated by an ancient Greek parable involving a fox and a hedgehog. The fox is a sleek, beautiful, and cunning creature. It is capable of coming up with 1,000 different ways to attack. Every day, the fox waits in the shadows, plotting a new, complex maneuver to catch the hedgehog. It is fast, agile, and seemingly unstoppable in its complexity. The hedgehog, by contrast, is a simple, dowdy creature. It isn't particularly fast, and it doesn't have a repertoire of clever tricks. However, every time the fox lunges for the kill, the hedgehog does exactly one thing. It rolls itself into a perfect, spiky ball. The fox, despite all its cunning, is thwarted by this one simple, effective defense. The hedgehog wins because it knows one big thing and sticks to it, while the fox scatters its energy across 100 different directions. Jim Collins found that good to great companies are like hedgehogs. They don't try to be everything to everyone. Instead, they find a single, simple concept that guides every move they make. Finding your hedgehog concept isn't a matter of a weekend retreat or a clever brainstorming session. On average, it took the good to great companies about 4 years of rigorous debate and iteration to land on their core strategy. This process is driven by three critical questions, often visualized as three overlapping circles. The first circle asks, what can you be the best in the world at? This is not about what you want to be the best at, or what you are currently good at. It is an honest assessment of your unique potential. If you cannot be the best in the world at your core business, then your core business cannot be the basis of your hedgehog concept. It requires the courage to walk away from profitable ventures if they don't fit this criterion. The second circle asks, what drives your economic engine? You must identify the single most important denominator that impacts your financial success. Is it profit per customer, profit per employee, profit per store? Good to great companies found the one metric that, if maximized, would have the greatest impact on their long-term sustainability. They didn't get bogged down in a dozen different KPIs. They focused on the one that truly moved the needle. The third circle asks, what are you deeply passionate about? Greatness cannot be sustained by cold calculation alone. You have to care about what you are doing. The good to great companies didn't just pick a market because it was profitable. They picked a path that their people could believe in. When these three circles intersect, you find your hedgehog concept. Once this concept is established, it acts as a filter for every decision. If an opportunity doesn't fit within the three circles, the answer is a firm no. This level of simplicity and focus is what allows a company to stop thrashing about like a fox and start making the steady, unstoppable progress of a hedgehog. It isn't about being unimaginative. It's about having the discipline to be simple in a world that rewards complexity. When we read about a company's sudden rise to the top of the stock market, we often use words like breakthrough, revolution, or overnight success. From the outside, it looks as though a single event, a new product launch, a massive merger, or a charismatic new leader, suddenly catapulted the organization into greatness. However, the research conducted by Jim Collins tells a very different story. For the people inside the good to great companies, there was no single aha moment. There was no launch party that signaled the beginning of greatness. Instead, their success was the result of a phenomenon called the flywheel effect. Imagine a massive, heavy flywheel, a metal disc mounted on an axle weighing thousands of pounds. Your job is to get that flywheel to spin as fast as possible. At first, you push with all your might and the flywheel doesn't move an inch. You keep pushing, and after a lot of effort, it moves a fraction of an inch. You keep pushing in a consistent direction. After hours of work, the flywheel completes one full rotation. It's still moving slowly, but you don't stop. You keep pushing. 2 rotations, 4, 8, then something happens. The weight of the flywheel begins to work in your favor. The momentum builds. Suddenly, the wheel is spinning so fast that its own weight carries it forward. Each additional push you give it results in a massive increase in speed. This is how greatness happens. It is the cumulative effect of many small, disciplined actions taken in the same direction over a long period of time. A perfect example of this is Nucor, the steel company. In 1965, Nucor was on the verge of bankruptcy. They didn't have a grand transformation plan that they announced to the world. Instead, they realized they could produce steel more efficiently using minimills, a technology that was cheaper and more flexible than the massive furnaces used by the giants of the industry. They built one mill. It worked. They used the profits to build another. They focused on their people and their processes, pushing the flywheel 1 inch at a time. By 1975, CEO Ken Iverson looked at the progress they had made and realized that if they simply kept doing exactly what they were doing, they would eventually become the most profitable steel company in America. It took 2 decades of pushing in the same direction, but they eventually achieved that goal, outperforming the general market by 5 times. Contrast this with the comparison companies in the study. These companies often fell into what Collins calls the doom loop. Instead of pushing the flywheel in one direction, they would get impatient. They would push for a while, get mediocre results, and then decide they needed a new direction. They would fire the CEO, hire a celebrity leader, and launch a massive new change program. This is like stopping the flywheel and trying to push it in the opposite direction. They never gathered momentum because they were always starting over. Greatness requires the faith to keep pushing the same wheel, even when the results aren't immediately visible. In the modern era, we are often told that technology is the primary driver of change. We see companies like Amazon or Google and assume that their greatness comes from their technological prowess. However, when Collins looked at the good-to-great companies, he found a surprising truth. Technology was never the asterisk cause asterisk of their transformation. Instead, these companies viewed new technology as an asterisk accelerator of momentum, not the creator of it. If a company has a clear hedgehog concept and a spinning flywheel, the right technology can act like a shot of nitrous oxide to an engine. It makes everything go faster. But if you don't have a clear strategy or disciplined people, technology will only make your failure happen faster. The good-to-great companies were often pioneers in the application of specific, carefully chosen technologies, but they only adopted them after they knew how those technologies fit into their three circles. They asked themselves, does this technology fit our hedgehog concept? If it did, they became obsessed with being the best at applying it. If it didn't, they ignored it, no matter how much their competitors were hyping it up. They never used technology as a way to fix a broken culture or a lack of strategy. They understood that you cannot use tools to solve people problems or thought problems. The comparison companies, on the other hand, often suffered from technology foam, fear of missing out. They would jump on every new trend, hoping that a new software system or a flashy website would suddenly make them great. They treated technology as a goal in itself rather than a means to an end. Because they lacked a core concept, they ended up with a collection of expensive tools that didn't work together and didn't move the flywheel. The lesson is clear. First get the right people, then get the right strategy, and only then use technology to accelerate your progress toward greatness. One of the most striking findings of the good-to-great research was the nature of the leaders who guided these transitions. We are conditioned by the media to believe that great leaders must be larger than life, charismatic, and perhaps even a bit arrogant. We think of the celebrity CEO who graces the covers of magazines and commands the room with a booming voice. But the research showed the exact opposite. Every single good-to-great company was led by what Collins calls a level 5 leader. A level 5 leader is a study in contradiction. They possess a paradoxical blend of extreme personal humility and intense professional will. These are not people who seek the limelight. In fact, many of them are described as quiet, reserved, and even shy. However, when it comes to the success of the company, they are fanatically driven. They will do whatever it takes to make the company great, including making difficult decisions that might make them unpopular. Consider Darwin Smith, the CEO of Kimberly-Clark. Smith was a mild-mannered man who didn't look or act like a corporate titan. He dressed simply, often looking more like a farmer than an executive. He spent his vacations working on his farm in Wisconsin, often in the company of plumbers and electricians. He had no interest in being a hero or a celebrity. Yet, under his leadership, Kimberly-Clark became the leading paper-based consumer goods company in the world. He had the will to sell off the company's core paper mills, the very foundation of the business, because he realized that the future lay in consumer products. It was a gut-wrenching decision, but he made it because it was right for the company. Level 5 leaders also have a unique way of handling credit and blame. Collins uses the analogy of the window and the mirror. When things go well, a level 5 leader looks out the window to give credit to their team, to luck, or to external factors. They never point to themselves. However, when things go poorly, they look in the mirror and take full responsibility. They never blame bad luck or the economy for their failures. This stands in stark contrast to the leaders of the comparison companies, who often had gargantuan egos. These leaders were often successful in the short term, but they failed to build a lasting institution. A classic example is Stanley Galt of Rubbermaid. Galt was a brilliant but tyrannical leader who was known for his sincere tyranny. He drove the company to great heights, but he failed to develop a deep management team or a plan for succession. When he left, the company had no internal strength to sustain its momentum. Within 5 years of his departure, Rubbermaid, once one of the most admired companies in America, was acquired by a competitor. A Level 5 leader's greatest ambition is to see the company succeed after they are gone. Most people assume that the first step in building a great company is to come up with a brilliant strategy and then find people to execute it. This is the first what, then who approach. However, the good to great companies did the exact opposite. They followed the first who, then what principle. They realized that if you start with the right people, you don't have to worry about motivating them or managing them. The right people are self-motivated by an inner drive to produce the best results and be part of something great. Imagine a bus. The leader is the bus driver. Most leaders start by telling everyone where the bus is going. But the good to great leaders started by getting the right people on the bus, getting the wrong people off the bus, and getting the right people in the asterisk right seats. Only then did they figure out where to drive it. Dick Cooley, the former CEO of Wells Fargo, provides a perfect illustration of this. When he took the helm, the banking industry was facing the massive uncertainty of deregulation. No one knew exactly how the industry would change or what the winning strategy would be. Cooley didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he focused on hiring the most talented, high-character people he could find. He reasoned that if he had a team of the best and the brightest, they would figure out the strategy together as the world changed. He was right. Warren Buffett later remarked that Wells Fargo had the best management team in the business. Good to great companies prioritize character over specific skills or experience. They believe that you can teach someone how to use a software system or manage a budget, but you cannot teach someone to have a work ethic, integrity, or a level 5 mindset. They foster an environment where A players thrive and those who don't fit the culture quickly feel uncomfortable and leave. This principle also requires a certain level of rigor in personnel decisions. There are 3 practical rules that good to great companies follow. 1. When in doubt, don't hire. Keep looking. Even if the need is urgent, do not settle for a good person when you need a great person. 2. When you know you need to make a people change, act. Don't let the wrong people stay on the bus. It's unfair to the person who doesn't fit, and it's frustrating for the high performers who have to pick up the slack. 3. Put your best people on your biggest opportunities, not your biggest problems. Comparison companies often try to fix their problems by assigning their best managers to them, which only results in managing decay. Great companies use their best talent to fuel growth. One of the most profound psychological concepts found in the research is the Stockdale paradox. It is named after Admiral James Stockdale, who was the highest-ranking U.S. military officer held as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. Stockdale was tortured dozens of times and spent years in solitary confinement with no certainty of whether he would ever see his family again. When Jim Collins asked Stockdale how he survived such a horrific ordeal, Stockdale gave a surprising answer. He said that the people who didn't make it out were the optimists. These were the prisoners who would say, "We'll be out by Christmas." Christmas would come and go. Then they would say, "We'll be out by Easter." Easter would come and go. Eventually, they died of a broken heart. Stockdale survived because he practiced a duality of mind. He never lost faith that he would eventually prevail and return home, but at the same time, he had the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of his current reality, no matter how grim they were. He didn't sugarcoat the situation. He accepted the torture and the uncertainty as facts to be dealt with, not ignored. Good to great companies operate exactly like this. They have an unwavering, almost fanatical belief that they will eventually become the best in their industry. However, they are also brutally honest about their current situation. They don't hide from bad news. They seek it out. They look at their declining market share or their failing product lines with clear eyes. A classic comparison is the story of Scott Paper and Kimberly Clark when they both faced competition from the giant Procter & Gamble P&G. Scott Paper, the market leader at the time, saw P&G's entry into the paper market as a death knell. They became defeatist and tried to diversify into other areas where they wouldn't have to compete with P&G. They basically gave up on their core business because they couldn't face the reality of the challenge. Kimberly-Clark, led by Darwin Smith, took the opposite approach. They viewed P&G's entry as a challenge that would make them better. They even held a moment of silence for P&G in a meeting, acknowledging the strength of their competitor while simultaneously vowing to beat them. They confronted the fact that P&G was a formidable opponent, but they never doubted their own ultimate success. 2 decades later, Kimberly-Clark had outperformed P&G in nearly every category and had actually acquired Scott Paper. Greatness requires the strength to see the world as it is, while never losing sight of what it can become. Confronting the brutal facts is only possible if the people within an organization feel safe enough to speak the truth. Jim Collins found that Level 5 leaders are masters at creating a culture where the truth is heard. This is more difficult than it sounds, especially for charismatic or powerful leaders. If a leader is too dominant, their subordinates will often tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. This ostrich effect, burying one's head in the sand, is a primary cause of corporate failure. To combat this, good to great leaders act more like Socratic moderators than traditional commanders. In management meetings, they don't start by giving the answers. They start by asking questions. They use questions to gain an understanding, not as a way to cross-examine or belittle their employees. They want to uncover the red flags before they become catastrophes. Another key element is the encouragement of autopsies without blame. When something goes wrong, and things will go wrong, the focus is not on finding a scapegoat. Instead, the team conducts a rigorous analysis to understand why the failure happened. When you remove the fear of being blamed, people are much more likely to report problems early when they can still be fixed. Great companies also use red flag mechanisms. These are systems that force information to the top, regardless of whether it's pleasant or not. For example, a company might give its customers the power to withhold payment if they aren't satisfied, which creates an immediate red flag for the accounting and management teams. It's a way of making sure that you cannot ignore the truth. The research showed that the good to great companies didn't have better information than the comparison companies. They didn't have secret data or better consultants. The difference was entirely in how they handled the information they had. They were willing to look at the ugly parts of their business and have heated, passionate debates about how to fix them. They understood that a peaceful office is often a sign of a company that is hiding from reality. When most people hear the word discipline, they think of a strict set of rules, a rigid hierarchy, and a drill sergeant boss. But in the context of good to great companies, discipline means something very different. It is not about imposing order from the top down. It is about hiring disciplined people who don't need to be managed. When you have disciplined people, you don't need hierarchy. When you have disciplined thought, you don't need bureaucracy. When you have disciplined action, you don't need excessive controls. A culture of discipline is built around the hedgehog concept. It is the fanatical adherence to the 3 circles. This means having the discipline to say no to opportunities that fall outside of your core focus, even if those opportunities look profitable. It's about being consistent to a fault. One of the most vivid examples of this is Wells Fargo during the era of deregulation. While other banks were spending money on corporate jets and executive dining rooms to impress clients, Wells Fargo was ruthlessly efficient. They sold the corporate jets. They replaced the fancy executive dining room with a caterer that served college dorm-style food. The CEO would even call out managers who submitted reports in expensive, glossy binders, arguing that the money should be spent on things that actually helped the customers. This wasn't just about being cheap. It was about a disciplined focus on their economic engine, profit per employee. They knew that every dollar spent on executive perks was a dollar that wasn't helping them win in a deregulated market. It is important to distinguish a culture of discipline from a disciplined tyrant. As we saw with Stanley Galt at Rubbermaid, a tyrant can force a company to be disciplined through sheer force of will, but that discipline is temporary. It's like a rubber band being stretched. The moment the tyrant leaves, the organization snaps back to its original, undisciplined state. In a true good-to-great company, the discipline is part of the culture. It lives in the people, not just the leader. This allows the company to remain great for decades, long after the original transition team has retired. As we conclude our exploration of the transition from good to great, it is clear that greatness is not a matter of circumstance, luck, or even pure genius. Instead, it is a matter of conscious choice and rigorous discipline. The path to world-class performance is paved with the brutal facts of reality and fueled by an unwavering faith in an organization's ultimate success. The key insights we've discussed, the Level 5 leader, the first who principle, the hedgehog concept, and the flywheel effect, form a cohesive framework that any leader can use to evaluate their own organization. The most important takeaway is that greatness is a cumulative process. It is not about the big hit or the miracle moment. It is about getting the right people on the bus and then pushing that flywheel, day after day, in a consistent direction that aligns with your deepest passions and your greatest strengths. Ask yourself, do you have the courage to confront the brutal facts of your own life or business? Are you willing to do the hard work of finding your three circles, or are you content to chase every shiny new fox that crosses your path? Do you look in the mirror when things go wrong, or do you look out the window for someone to blame? This knowledge matters because good is no longer enough in a globalized, hyper-competitive world. To endure, to provide real value, and to leave a lasting legacy, we must strive for greatness. The roadmap is here. The evidence is clear. The only question remains whether you have the discipline to follow it. Greatness is not a destination you reach and then stop. It is a way of operating that must be renewed every single day. By embracing these principles, you don't just improve your bottom line. You build an institution that stands the test of time and makes a meaningful impact on the world. For more book summaries for free, install Zyroverse.